made an album using AI. Is that wrong? Is AI evil? Is it still my music? AI is a very fascinating technology, but it's also kind of controversial. Why is this? In my opinion, it is because of how AI is taught. AI is taught using examples from the real world. And for more of the creative aspects of AI, generating music or visual imagery, it was taught by other people's works. For example, in order to generate an expressionistic image of a horse, the AI has to be taught what an image is, then what is expressionism, and then finally what is a horse, and how did expressionists paint horses. So all of this requires a set of information, and that set of information could possibly include copyrighted works of art or words or music, what have you. And the big problem with AI at the moment is that the individual creators of those works were not compensated for this. This is a serious problem, one that when working on this AI project, I decided to keep in mind as I was auditioning the various AI music services. I did my best to select ethical AI companies and services, ones that compensate the artists they're learning from. But at the end of the day, I really have no idea if these companies and or services are doing what they say or not doing what they say. And with AI being out there for years now, I'm afraid it's a little too late on this. We need to have some sort of control, global control over what AI is trained on, but those discussions are happening very slow, if happening at all. So that leaves us with the question, with all that in mind, is AI evil? So here's an interesting take. If someone comes to me and says, draw me a spaceship, my first question would be, what kind of spaceship? Is it something from Star Wars? Is it from Star Trek? Is it a 1950s sci-fi classic spaceship? There are many different styles of spaceship, and I, as an artist, will need to either teach myself about the various kinds of spaceships or draw upon my knowledge that I have accumulated over the 50 years of my life. I know what a Star Wars spaceship looks like because I have seen Star Wars. I know they have a certain style, a certain level of detail, and an overall look because I've been immersed in the Star Wars design language for almost my entire life. So the take is this. Is this what AI is doing? Is AI simply the equivalent of a 1,000-year-old person calling on their experiences, memories, and knowledge of their life? I don't know. I don't have the answers. I just have a lot of questions. I mean, I did pay for a ticket to see Star Wars, but does that give me the right to outright use the literal imagery from Star Wars as my own artwork? No, that's copyrighted work, meaning I can't take a still frame of the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars and sell it as my own artwork. But can I use my knowledge of Star Wars to create original art based on Star Wars? Meaning, can I make a drawing of the Millennium Falcon and sell it as my own work? That gets into the whole fan art thing, and that in and of itself is another legal gray area. But can I make a drawing of a spaceship that looks like it was designed and constructed in the Star Wars universe? A spaceship that has aspects of a Star Wars spaceship without actually being a Star Wars spaceship? I believe I can indeed do this. This is something that artists and musicians have been doing for centuries. We are, after all, nothing but a composite of all of our memories and our experiences, and we draw on those when we create. Do you want to make a happy painting? What makes a painting happy? We go back into our minds and remember seeing a painting that made us happy, and we take some of that and incorporate it into our art. Same with music. We want to make a noisy punk rock song, so we grab our electric guitar. Why? Because through our collective memories and experiences, we know that an electric guitar is needed for a noisy punk rock song. I mean, we don't literally reproduce a Bob Ross painting for our happy painting, but we can take what we learned from Bob Ross and make our own happy painting. It's influences versus reproduction. Another take on this is, back in the day, I used to have CD-ROMs of hundreds of stock images. So I'm working on an art project, okay? And I need a mountain in the background. So I grab a mountain stock image and plop it into my image. And is the image I'm creating not mine because I use stock imagery in it? I understand that I simply cannot take the stock image and sell it as my own, but the image I create using the stock image is indeed mine. It was created using my artistic sense, my creativity, my compositioning skills, my color choices, my aesthetic. All of these things I put into the image I create, even when I'm using stock imagery. Similarly, I used to have CDs of audio clips and music loops that I would remix into music pieces. I did not record these loops. I did not make these loops. I bought these loops. But the music I created by chopping them up and rearranging them was absolutely mine. While I'm not defending the way AI is currently taught, using non-compensated source material, in fact, I think this is one of the major negatives in using AI, and I don't want to ignore that. However, AI is here, and AI, as it is, will be used today and tomorrow. Half of the world is happily and joyfully using AI, the other half of the world is afraid to even talk about it. And I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to know more. I am an amateur musician, and I have been for around 40 years, since I was around 16. I've been in several bands over the years, but most of my music has been created by myself. I have music inside me, and I need to get it out. I make music that I want to listen to. I've self-released over 20 albums over the years, mostly to little or no sales at all. For me, making music is about making music, and I have to make music. So I started looking into the AI-generated music, and while some of it is, okay, good, a lot of it is simply, hey, I want to make a song about armadillos that sounds like Nine Inch Nails with a tuba solo in the middle. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It just seemed to me that AI was very much geared towards those who don't normally make music. But I wanted to see what AI could do for someone who is already a musician, even a non-professional museum. What can AI do for someone who can make music? At this point, I'm going to pause here and say, I'm not here to recommend one AI music service over another. That's for you to investigate and choose for yourself should you want to make your own. I use several different services, many different ways. I combined the outputs of one service and fed it into another. Others I used in their entirety. Then I chopped up and rearranged all those outputs in my sequencer, etc., etc. The idea of this album came from two books. One is a book of poetry I wrote in 1985 called In the Dead Electric Light. The second is a book of lyrics I wrote in 1988. My initial idea was to create a standard album of songs, but as I read through the poetry book and lyric book, I started to get an idea. I've always been a big fan of soundtracks, both the instrumental symphonic form and also in the form of a collection of songs that appear in the movie. Think of the soundtrack to any John Hughes film, the Crow soundtrack, the Lost Boys. The most recent soundtracks that really spoke to me were the soundtracks to Into the Spider-Verse movies and the soundtrack to Arcane, the animated Netflix series. All of these created such a mood and a vibe that it's hard to imagine these films and shows without them. And in fact, these soundtracks, in my opinion, have surpassed the original intent of movie music and have reached a level of being able to stand alone as brilliant, emotional, introspective collections of music that live way beyond the original intent. So, as I was reading my old poems and song lyrics, I began to see a story emerge. Nothing really specific, but a narrative nonetheless, of emotional beats. More of a collection of vibes that, when told in a certain order, conveyed a story to me. What that story is literally is not as important as the emotional arc I want to tell. And in an upcoming video, I'll go through each song and give my original inspiration for them, but that'll come later. But I thought it would be a really cool idea to take this nebulous emotional narrative and make a conceptual soundtrack album. For the imaginary film or imaginary Netflix limited series that was swimming around in my creative unconscious. And it would be all based on my poetry and lyrics from the 80s, and it would be called In the Dead Electric Light. So I took the entire contents of the poetry book and entered it into an AI lyric writing bot. A lot, if not most, of my poetry does not rhyme, has no meter to speak of. It's more of a stream of consciousness type of poetry. And I knew this probably would not work very well as song lyrics. So I decided to let the AI try to generate a bunch of songs based on my writings. I then took the lyric book and rewrote some of them. I mean, it was written in the 80s, so they needed some work, some finessing. I also gave the AI a chance at refining my lyrics, and I was actually surprised with the results. I grew up a goth kid, so my writings at the time were filled with appropriate amount of emotional darkness, self-introspection, teen angst, what have you. The AI was very good at capturing my style. In fact, when I first read the AI-generated lyrics, I thought, wow, some of these are kind of trite and somewhat stereotypical of a Hot Topic mall goth. But then I reread my own lyrics and I was like, well, no, that actually sounds a lot like me, like my writing. So yeah, that tracks. Also, I noticed a propensity of the AI using certain words repetitively. Words like echoes, shadows, whispers, and dance showed up so many times that I started specifically to tell the AI not to use these words. But then again, I went back to my source materials, my lyrics and my poems, and surely enough, there was echoes in there, a lot. Shadows, check. Whispers, check. Dance, check. It was all me, all along. So I decided to lean on that and use those words as sort of a connecting thread between all the songs. In fact, it ended up being sort of a tagline or subtitle of In the Dead Electric Light, Echoes, Whispers, Shadows, Dance. So anyway, now I had a bunch of lyrics, but no music. Fortunately, in my lyric book, I had jotted down various chord progressions and melody lines. And at the time, I thought it might work with the lyrics. So at least it was a starting point. So I recorded myself singing a handful of the lyrics to a click track and started to feed those recordings into the AI music generating service. I wanted my soundtrack to be a collection of songs in and around the synth pop genre. More specifically, the early 80s new wave alternative post-punk scene. I love me a big fat analog synth sound, and the minimalism of those early synth-based songs really speak to me. Each song would be a slight variation on these styles and theme, but they would also sit well with each other as a collective. But before I got ahead of myself, I needed some rules. I know myself too well. I am not good with a literal blank page. I need to have some guidelines put in place. I find that I am much more creative when working within a set of rails, even if I have to put them there myself. Plus, I wanted to keep myself honest about what I was creating and what the AI was creating. So the first rule was that if I was going to use anything AI generated, it needed to sound like something I would do, something I would have made myself. And to a lesser extent, something I myself could play. I say to a lesser extent because nowadays I'm mostly writing on my laptop versus a MIDI controller or synthesizer, and I don't do a lot of actual playing these days. But I did want to keep that part at least in the back of my mind. I know the music I make, I know how I make the music I make, and I know what that sounds like. I know my limitations and I know my aspirations. So I felt confident in my ability to curate the AI generated elements. For things like guitars and instruments other than synthesizers, I wasn't going to limit myself too much. Normally when I'm making music, I need a guitar track or other instrument that I can't play or fake with synthesizers. I would ask one of my musician friends to record a track or two for me. In a similar vein, I wanted to think of the AI music in the same way I would as those CDs full of audio loops from back in the day. The amount of care I took in selecting a loop back then in my remixing days would be the same amount of care I'd take in auditioning AI-generated elements. The second rule was to allow myself some instances of creative inspiration or happy accidents. These are moments in every artist's process when we surprise ourselves with a spark of unexpected creativity, something that we normally would not or could not have done. I know I've experienced these moments in almost every project I've ever worked on, be it music or visual art. I wanted to be able to capture that. So I decided that if the AI gave me something that, one, did not sound like me, but two, was really, really cool, that I could use it. But I would limit myself to 2 or 3 of these during the entire recording process. So the AI music generating process itself went like this. I loaded my song lyrics into the AI. These were either my lyrics as written in 1988 with some edits done by me, or the lyrics generated from AI from my poetry book, or some form of both. Sometimes I really liked the AI lyrics, but there would be a verse or a line or two that I didn't like, so I rewrote those myself. Some songs I didn't like the AI rewritten lyrics at all and went back to the original words from my poetry book, even though they didn't rhyme or whatever. And as I mentioned earlier, I also recorded myself singing melody lines and uploaded these into the AI. The recordings would serve as a vocal reference for the AI as it generated the singing parts and the underlying music. Using text prompts, I was able to specify whether it should be a male or female voice or both, or to give that voice some characteristics like soft or breathy, or make it more emotional or more restrained. I used my vocal references for most of the song, but for a few of them, I let the AI generate an alternate melody based on the vocal recordings. For the actual music part of the song generating, all of the various AI music services work a little differently, but the generating process is pretty similar among them all. You give the AI written directions on the song you want to create. This can be very broad. Make me a song about armadillos that sounds like Nine Inch Nails with a tuba solo in the middle. Or you can go as specific as you like. And this is predominantly the method that I used. I specified the instrumentation, analog synths, minimalistic guitars, industrial noise, drums, etc., the tempo, and the chord progressions when they weren't already determined by the vocal recordings. And lastly, the mood or the vibe I wanted to convey. I was also able to structure the song, intro, verse, chorus, bridge, etc., etc. You can put the exact same prompts and the exact same instructions into the exact same AI, and you will get absolutely different results every time. So if the first generated song doesn't work for you, then you just run it again. For each song on this album, I think there are at least 10 to 15 different versions that I generated and threw in the trash. Once the AI generated a song I liked, and if it followed my rules, I either downloaded it and chopped it up in my workstation, I use Ableton Live, or I fed it right back into the AI. Most of the AI services give you a way to edit a section of a generated song in some way. And in my opinion, this is what separates the good music generators from the average ones. The ability and the degree at which you can change a piece of music that the AI has already generated. There were songs that worked right away and I didn't need more than just a few tweaks on my end. There were others where a verse wasn't working and I needed to change the words, or I needed to add in another chorus or a guitar solo, or there was one part I liked and everything else was crap. So in those cases, I just saved the part that I liked as a new audio clip and fed that back into the AI. I knew there were some songs on this album that were going to have a female vocal and some that would need a male vocal. I did my best in trying to figure out which song needed which beforehand, but after the fact, there were a few songs that I thought, this would sound better with a different voice. In these cases, I went to another AI service that specialized in generating singing voices based on uploaded recordings. I fed that AI with the vocal I wanted to change and was able to replace the vocals fairly easily. So once I had all of the songs generated in full or in parts, I brought everything into my workstation and started creating the final versions of each song. Everything was put together, arranged, mixed, and mastered, and then it was all done. It was during this process, actually a little bit before this process, but close enough, that I had my biggest learning about AI-generated music, and this was truly a mindfuck. One of the songs needed a change in the lead synth. I like the melody, but not so much the sound of the lead synth. So what I needed to do was take the individual stem tracks and replace the lead synth line. Stem tracks are what they sound like, the individual tracks that make up a song, the drum track, the bass track, the synth track, the guitar track, the vocal track, etc., etc. And I thought this would be easy, considering this song was generated by a computer. The stem tracks would be very clean and easy to work with. I could not have been more wrong, and this is where the mindfuck comes in. Normally, when I record a song, I'll record it track by track, unless I'm with a band and we all record our parts together. But I'll start with a drum track, then I'll play the bass track over that, and then I'll play the synth track over that, and you get the idea. The song is gradually built track by track over the recording process. But the AI doesn't generate song tracks. The AI generates a song. There are no drum tracks, there are no synth tracks, because the AI generates a song, the entire song, everything, everywhere, all at once. That song has never had individual tracks. It is the song. It has been and only ever shall be the song. So it can't generate individual tracks because there never were individual tracks. It's the song, and it is only the song. This really screwed with my brain until I was able to understand the concept of something springing into being in its completed state. For example, imagine I can manifest a pencil out of thin air. You got it? Can you picture that? Okay. So the pencil is made of wood and graphite and metal and a little bit of rubber at the top. Where did the wood come from? How did that metal bit get into that shape? How did the graphite get stuck precisely in the middle of the wood? A pencil, like pretty much anything else in this world, has a history. Even when it's a new thing, there is a history. The wood came from a tree somewhere. It was turned into a pencil at the factory, and then it was presented to you. But the AI song has no history. It looks like and feels like and sounds like it has a history, but it does not. It was birthed in its final form and has absolutely no past from the moment it was created. Now, there are some AI services that indeed do create individual tracks, and I did indeed use some of those. And in my specific case, I was able to use a couple different AI services and some non-AI audio plugins to separate my songs into individual tracks, and everything worked out fine. I was able to separate the tracks and take out things and re-record synth lines, etc. But the whole concept of what a thing is not necessarily a thing anymore was really my biggest learning and my biggest surprise about working with AI music generation. So the question is, do I feel ownership over these songs? Is this my music? The short answer is yes. However, there are some caveats. Legally speaking, I have ownership of these songs, but this is seriously the least important factor in all of this. Ethically speaking, I do feel a bit weird about using the AI when there are so many problems with it currently. I'm not going to say I feel dirty, but at the same time, I don't feel completely clean either. But in my heart, I made this album from a good place, and that is enough for me. But creatively speaking, spiritually speaking, if you will, do I feel like these are my songs? All of the lyrics were either mine that I wrote or ones generated by AI based on my old poetry and lyric book. And with that, I feel more ownership over the songs that predominantly feature my written lyrics over the ones predominantly written by AI. This is not surprising, this is to be expected. The music is similar. The songs in which I specified chord structures and melody lines, the ones I actually sang for reference, are the ones I feel more ownership over. But I do feel ownership over the album as a whole. To me, this is indeed my music. More specifically, I feel ownership more in the way a producer might feel ownership. I've played the music producer role only a few times in my life, and what I feel towards these songs is very, very similar to how I feel about those previous projects. Did I play every note? No. Did I sing every song? No. But did I pour out all of my creative energies in the same way as if I did? Yes, I did. I think we all have a all or nothing approach when it comes to generative AI. We're either all in or we won't even give it a chance. In fact, I'm certain there are some people who won't even give this music a listen to simply because it was partially AI generated. And that's cool. I mean, I'm bummed, but that's cool. But I think if we could learn to use generative AI as yet another creative tool in our toolbox, as opposed to using it as the final product itself, we might find something worthy and helpful in our creative pursuits and artistic endeavors. I know I did. I had a lot of fun making this album, and I learned a lot too. So thanks for watching this. I really appreciate you, and I hope you enjoy listening to In the Dead Electric Light as much as I enjoy. Thanks again. Bye-bye.